Hey everybody, Marcus here. We're gonna be watching a video. Um, that video is called "Why There's No Such Thing as a Good Billionaire." I kind of stumbled up on this video earlier today and was watching it, and I thought it would make a good video. So I'm not gonna really react to it because it's a 20-minute video. So I'm gonna kind of just skip through. Hopefully, I can skip through some of the main parts that I want to talk about. But let's go ahead and start the video.
Found this story believable, including me at first, because it fits Chenard's carefully cultivated public image. He's been described for years as the reluctant billionaire, a frugal rock climber.
I just skipped the very, very beginning, but he's talking about the Patagonia owner who's a billionaire.
Who just loved making gear for his friends, then tripped and accidentally started a $3 billion company. People tell stories about Chenard eating cans of cat food to save money, and he famously still drives a Subaru instead of a fancy car. The dude supposedly doesn't even own a cell phone, which is maybe why he doesn't know that human food is just as cheap as cat food. You weren't saving money, Yvonne, you were just being weird. And as far as corporations go, Patagonia does have a solid environmental record. They've donated over $140 million.
I did kind of want to address this. I'm from Utah originally, and Patagonia's like huge out there because of all the outdoor activities. And I know that Patagonia and the owner specifically is like an environmentalist. I mean, he's like hardcore activist on protecting the environment and climate change. So he's clearly like a big part of that movement. And I kind of want to skip through. I mean, he's just talking about, you know, this guy's supposed to be the best. Everyone loves him because he's like doing all the right things. And then he decides to donate his business to charity. And that's where it all goes wrong because it's a big old lie.
His own accountant said that he'll receive no tax benefit for his donation whatsoever. But if you want the straight story about a billionaire's finances, it might make sense to ask someone other than the guy who cooks the books for him. The truth is, if Chenard really just wanted to make sure that Patagonia's value stayed intact, he didn't need to donate it to a nonprofit. He could have just given all $3 billion worth of shares to his kids. They could have kept running the company according to Daddy Dearest's wishes and lovingly rapped about him at corporate board meetings. So, why didn't he do that? Simple. He would have had to pay $1.2 billion taxes. And Yvonne's a good billionaire, so he doesn't like paying taxes. I mean, why should he have to pay for the roads his products are transported on, the schools and universities his workers are educated at, the GPS system that he uses to track his shipments, and the government research into heart attacks and cancer that have kept him alive until the ripe old age of 83? I mean, he's self-made, right? He did it all by himself. Now, I know what you're thinking. Adam, he didn't pay taxes because he did something better. He donated it to charity.
Okay. Actually, that's not what I was thinking. Like, he did something better. He donated his... Obviously, I mean, he's doing this for a tax break. The weird thing that I do somewhat agree with is why did his publicist or is it whatever come out and say that he didn't do this for a tax break? Which is why I'm like, okay, yeah, this guy sucks. Because he wants to be completely clean in the eye of, you know, activists. And you know, the reality is he's a billionaire who's already paid an unimaginable amount in taxes, as all billionaires have, which is one point that people tend to just forget about. Let's just continue.
Adam, he didn't pay taxes because he did something better. He donated it to charity. Well, let's take a look at how charitable that donation actually was. 98% of the shares Chenard donated were given to a brand new environmental nonprofit he formed called the Holdfast Collective. Kind of a weird name, sort of sounds like a mid-2000s Brooklyn indie band, but more about that in a second. The other 2%, though, were Chenard's voting shares. These are the shares that let you actually control what the company does. And these shares were given to something called the Patagonia Purpose Trust, which is solely controlled by Chenard and his family. What this means is that even though all the headlines said Chenard was donating the company to charity, he and his family will continue to control Patagonia forever. You know, I didn't know that was how donations worked. When I donate my car to 1-800-CARS for Kids, I can't show up the next weekend and take it for a joyride. but Ivan and his family can. Now, the family did have to pay about $17 million in gift taxes to execute this maneuver, but don't forget, they already saved 1.2.
So I can see why this would be like an annoying thing. And I don't necessarily even disagree that this guy is probably a scumbag. But it's not because of what he did in donating his company to avoid taxes. I got no problem with that. I mean, if your argument is that you're a bad person because you didn't want to pay your taxes, like I'm a bad person, and like almost everyone I know is a bad person because I don't know very many people who like paying taxes. So if that's your argument, then it's just frankly a terrible argument. But I do think that this guy in particular was trying to virtue signal and make it seem like he was doing all this good for the environment, when in reality, he's just making a savvy business move to retire, essentially, and then give his company to his children without having to pay a ton of in taxes. So he should have just done it and not made a headline about it. And now he looks kind of like I mean, frankly, that's what people do. Like, why are you virtue signaling? Like, there's no need to do this. Anyway, let's skip ahead a little bit. I think he starts talking about some other billionaires here. I think it's a little juicier.
Did an expose this year on Side when he pulled the exact same move as Ivan.
Yeah, so Bear Side, another billionaire, did the same thing, but he happens to be on the right side of the political aisle. Interesting.
He donated his entire fortune to charity. But Twitter and the New York Times didn't throw a party in Barry's honor. Why? Because the charity he donated to was run by Leonard Leo, the right-wing activist who spent the last couple decades stacking the Supreme Court with radical conservatives. You know, the same conservatives who recently overturned Roe v. Wade and banned the EPA from regulating greenhouse gases. Cheering on Chenard's abuse of
the anger in which he said that is where this guy becomes a little silly, in my opinion, because he's not actually making an empirical argument at this point. I mean, he essentially saying he's making his argument on what is moral. And that's a religious argument. At the end of the day, like Adam is making a religious argument about what is good. And what is not good is anything that has to do with the right, obviously. So if you're right wing in any regard, you're obviously evil. And frankly, I think he's saying if you're a rich person and you're not giving your money to the government, you're also a bad person. And it's funny because he's kind of alluding to the fact that that the first Patagonia guy was kind of not fully truthful about his donation. But really, what makes him bad is the fact that he doesn't want to pay his taxes. So, very interesting.
It's also, how to put this, the opposite of democracy. See, everyone sees the world differently, and everyone has different needs. And that means that no one person has all the answers. So the central insight of democracy is that we need to spread power widely and diversely among many different types of people if we want to solve our biggest problems. But billionaires like are doing the opposite. He's hoarding power, even if he feels that he's using it for good. But why should the owner of a fancy clothing company get to decide what's good or not? Why don't we all decide it together? You know, maybe the billionaires could kick in their fair share to a communal pool of money we all contribute to, and then we could vote on what to spend it on. I don't know, just a crazy idea I found on this dusty old scroll. But no, instead, our system allows a few wealthy people to amass disgusting amounts of wealth and then gives them a tax break when they use it to influence our political system. And that is no way to run a society. It works when everybody has a voice. So instead of applauding Chenard, we do a lot better to take that power back for ourselves. Now, I think that argument is pretty straightforward. Open and shut, video could end right there. Except that, when I posted about this on Twitter, I was deluged with...
I think the problem I have is this guy doesn't actually explain what democracy is. he's using very strange language to describe democracy, and he's making democracy sound like the moral good. When, you know, I don't like, again, these are not empirical arguments at all. They're religious arguments. He's essentially saying democracy good, capitalism bad, billionaires bad, government good. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're not making an argument. You need to actually make a point why maybe democracy is the right way to do it. There's, and America isn't even a democracy. Okay, it's a republic, and that's an important distinction. I think there's arguments why democracy isn't that good. You know, when people have all the power, sometimes they can elect really, really unfit people. I mean, if you look at truer democracies than America, like Canada and England, like they can elect people who have unbelievable amounts of power, who make horrible decisions for their country. I'm like jerking my neck around. They can make horrible decisions for their country, and then the people are like, and then they can just turn into a straight fascist society really quickly. Ironically enough, because of how much power are the people that get elected by a democracy. There needs to be a lot more checks and balances, which is why I believe the American system is superior in that regard. There's a lot of checks and balances. It's very difficult for someone to actually have all power in you.
Hate from angry billionaire fans. And I started to realize that something deeper is going on here. I mean, people really love this cat food eating, Subaru driving, humble billionaire who cares. And they get very mad at you if you criticize him. I mean, he's got a great brand and people love it. I love it too. I love my Pat.
Again, this is such a. This is like such a. It's not a empirical argument. He is saying that people just love billionaires. I don't know why. Like, they like their cat eating billionaires who give them really cool stuff. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not an argument. You're just like you're just assuming people's intent and based off like nonsense. I don't know. Very strange.
Patagonia jacket. When I wear it, I feel like I'm in that Wes Anderson movie where
I'm
Bill
actually gonna
Murray is
skip
sad
ahead.
in the
I think
60s.
He talks about
No, not
he's kind of
into
making
the town.
stupid jokes
They've
here.
built miles of bike.
Oh yeah, I did watch this part. He starts talking about the Waltons who started Walmart and how they created this wonderful town where they're from, and it has like an art museum, the Walmart Museum, and it's got all this cool stuff in this town that they're from. And then he afterwards he's like, yeah, so people love the Waltons. They like boosted the town they're from. They did all this good. They invested back into their community. But then the reality of
an entire
Walmart.
museum to tell people how humble and thrifty you are, but it works. People in this town love the Waltons, and when I struck up a conversation with them, they talked about the Waltons like they were family. Because of the Waltons' investment, the population of Bentonville has sextupled. Property values have skyrocketed. Oh, and don't forget the century, and the Waltons are changing that. That is unequivocally
all the good
Walmart
things.
was responsible for.
Okay, here's an empirical study on what happens when Walmart comes to town. And I think he's going to talk a little bit about that. 40
to 50% of the decline in small discount stores like the ones their museum was built to resemble. Other researchers found that when Walmart comes to town, it correlates with increased obesity, higher crime rates, and lower overall employment in that area. And this proves that the narrative Sam Walton spun about himself, that he never cared about money, he was just a humble.
I do think that's a weird argument that like the Waltons' entire company is kind of bad because look at these studies I didn't actually show that, you know, higher crime rates and obesity. And it's like, well, you don't have to shop at Walmart. I mean, it's a free country. And the reason why people shop at Walmart is because it's cheap. So isn't that a good thing to make a cheaper options for people who are struggling financially? which is why Walmart has become like. There's a lot of reasons that Walmart has become super successful. I mean, I don't really shop at Walmart that often because it is kind of a dump at times, but there's a reason why they're successful, and you don't have to shop there. People just keep on shopping. They just keep on going back. I don't know what's wrong with these billionaire lovers, man.
Humble guy who loved giving back. Well, it was bullshit.
And then
There
he's going to go
are no
into how evil all these other billionaires
listicles
are.
about
And
how you
frankly,
can live as cheaply.
I don't necessarily disagree that like billionaires got issues. Some of them. Like Warren Buffett, okay, frugal habits to save money. All right. I mean, I think he showed Bill Gates here, and I think he shows a couple others, and it's like I get it. Like these aren't like the most beloved characters. Like I don't think they're necessarily good people either, which is why I was fascinated to watch your video. But man, not making very convincing points so far.
The evil monopolist Andrew Carnegie wrote an essay called The Gospel of Wealth, in which he famously argued that it's the responsibility of the wealthy to give away their fortunes during their lifetimes. He even argued that it's the duty of a rich man to set an example of modest, unostentatious living, shunning display or extravagance. So Chenard and Walton weren't radicals by driving beat-up old cars. They were literally taking their instructions from Daddy Carnegie. Now, critically, Carnegie argued for that kind of charity because he believed that the system that gave him such unimaginable wealth was a good thing, and that it was inevitable. It was just the way of the universe. But even at the time, in the late 19th century, Americans knew that this was bullshit. They knew that Carnegie's wealth was the result of a broken system, and that it came at the expense of the customers he gouged, the workers he exploited, and the political system expense of knew that Carnegie's wealth was the result of a broken system, and that it came at the expense of the customers he gouged, the workers he exploited, and the political system he dominated. A political system that ensured workers had no right to organize,
Okay, so he's, again, essentially arguing against capitalism. I mean, obviously, the only way for people to become a billionaire is to exploit your workers, to gouge your customers, is that what he said? And to hijack the political system, I guess is what he said. I don't know if that's what he said verbatim. But anyway, I think that's those are not new arguments that people make against capitalism by any means. But it's just such a why do you have to make that argument? It's so silly in some regards. Like, let me ask you, Adam, this, if I could. Are all billionaires exploiting workers? I mean, I'm pretty sure LeBron James is a billionaire. Was he? I mean, maybe he is. I don't know. But I mean, there's a lot of billionaires out there. Are they all just exploiting the work of the people under them? It's just such a simple analysis, first off. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not going to make a whole argument against or for capitalism in this video, but obviously I don't think workers are necessarily being exploited when they're being paid a wage that they've agreed to. Regardless. And then the part that I do want to talk about is how the political influence that billionaires have. And it's like, okay, so you're talking about lobbying, I assume, which means that if you have billions of dollars, therefore you can just control the country. Like, I don't know if you can draw that arrow so easily, Adam. I mean, I'm no fan of like the idea that Congress is just lining their pockets with billionaires' money and then passing favorable legislation for their businesses. And I do find that hard to believe it is like actually happening at I don't know where the evidence is that would say that is happening at an extremely corrupt level. I think in reality, these billionaires are just giving money to politicians that they agree with, right? And I don't know. I think maybe there's extreme corruption in Congress, but it's not. It's probably the people who have been there for 30 years, right? Who keep on winning their elections. And who knows? I mean, the swamp, right? I don't know. Regardless, I hate that. Like, oh well, obviously billionaires are gaming our political system because they donated to political people, and that means they get what they want. It's like, I don't think it's that simple, man. It really isn't. It's just silly. And then the final part he talks about, it's just like,
anyway, we're able to make
he
high
brings up the
level of
New
taxation.
Deal. He really does. He says the New Deal. You got to hear it from him.
Who were alarmed at the excesses of Gilded Age plutocrats like Carnegie. Roosevelt introduced stronger labor protections, a minimum wage, strong antitrust enforcement so that monopolies couldn't form, and perhaps most importantly, a high level of taxation on the wealthy. And it worked. The labor movement flourished, which led directly to the creation of the American middle class. Average Americans, average white Americans, any.
This is just factually false. The New Deal did not work. It is well documented that it was the biggest failure. Maybe not ever, but it was a huge failure. It prolonged the Great Depression at least 5 years. What pulled people out of the Great Depression was World War II, and that's what led to the flourishing of the middle class, which is the baby boom. So after the war. So I don't even, this is just, I mean, I hate to get conspiratorial, but the New Deal was written, like the thing that the New Deal really did was it created so many bureaucracies in this country that have now to in this day become unbelievably corrupt. And those people, and you want to talk about democracy, none of those bureaucrats are elected by the people. They're appointed by the executive branch. So it's only giving the executive branch more power. The progressive movement is, you know, they have no interest in giving people the power. Like, so I mean, they want to get change done no matter any way they can, whether it's through the Supreme Court or through the executive branch or through, you know, this is my conspiracy, is the people who wrote the New Deal became bureaucrats, and then they wrote our, you know, educational curriculum, which is very positive. I mean, I remember when I was in high school learning American history, and my professor was very, very positive, and the texts were very positive towards the New Deal. I wonder why. I wonder who wrote it. It was the people who wrote the New Deal. And that's probably where your education comes from, why it was the greatest thing ever. But yeah, I mean, it's not good. Silly point to make at the end of a video.
Were able
like
to
this.
make a living wage, save for retirement, and build wealth of their own. Wealthy people still existed, and they were still able to make money, but the age of titanic billionaires running the country as their personal empires seemed to be over. If you're trying to remember who the Mark Zuckerberg of the 1950s was, I'll give you a hint. There wasn't one. But over the following decades, starting in the 70s and 80s, the policies that created this incredible level of prosperity started to be dismantled. Deregulation of the financial industry, weakened antitrust enforcement, tax cuts, welfare reduction, and the gutting of the labor movement all contributed to skyrocketing inequality. Most people, average American.
What? That's an insane claim. I'd like to see some evidence of any of those things you just said.
Saw their wages stagnate or fall. But the rich did well, and the very rich did very well, and donating his money to the planet. Instead, I think we need to demand policies that prevent guys like him from amassing so much money to begin with, and that put power back in the hands of the people.
Anyway, I'm done with this video. I'm not impressed with this guy. I don't think he made any argument that I would consider good. Every single one of his arguments were religious in nature. He didn't make really any empirical statement. And this is the most heartbreaking aspect. Is got a decent amount of views. Let's look at the comments. This needs to go viral. Adam needs to ruin more things, okay? Gosh, I would love more content like this. I miss you ruining everything. I think part of the reason I was against people tearing down the Patagonia giveaway originally was that you hear so little positive news. But it is so terrible that billionaires can do this. Great content. Okay. I always tell my people we're in the midst of a new gilded age and nobody takes me seriously. A champion of the people who just knows the truth behind things. Yeah. This guy didn't say one true thing other than pointing out that this guy was doing this for a tax cut instead of, just actually giving his company, which is how everything is. Anyway, that's it. Thanks, guys.